Hellraiser is a movie that was written and directed by Clive Barker in his film directorial debut, as he wasn't happy with how some of his adaptations of previous works had come out in the past. So he decided to direct Hellraiser himself, although it wasn't called Hellraiser at the time. The movie is based off of the novella Hellbound Heart, which was also written by Barker. The studio requested he change the name, though, because they thought it sounded like a romance title. So when Barker went to the cast and crew and asked for a suggestion, a woman in her 60s reportedly replied, "What a woman would do for a good fuck." Which is fitting, but possibly still too romantic for 1980s audiences, and eventually they decided on Hellraiser. There are currently 11 films in the franchise. In 1987, Hellraiser came out. It did so well that 1 year later, Clive Barker's Hellbound, Hellraiser 2 came out. This is not only the only movie to have this weird naming convention, but it was also the only sequel to come out with only a year between movies. Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, came out 4 years later in 1992, followed by Hellraiser Bloodline in 1996, Hellraiser Inferno in 2000. Hellraiser Hellseeker came out in 2002, ending the movies coming out every 4 years streak, but would also be the start of the same director for the next three movies, with Hellraiser Deader and Hellraiser Hellworld being filmed back to back, and then both coming out in 2005. Hellraiser Revelations came out in 2011 and was the first time the character of Pinhead wasn't played by Doug Bradley. The script was reportedly so bad that he refused to be in the movie. And if you've seen where the series ended up, that's saying something. They tried to reboot the franchise in 2018, and that's a thing that happened. And then the series was rebooted again. This time, the author, Clive Barker, wrote the script for the movie, which came out this year in October 2022. It wouldn't be the first time either that Barker came back to the series and took over again. It's a pretty common thing now when a series ends for it to continue on in comic book form, but back in 1989 it wasn't all that common. There was a comic, and then he continued the story with that. He wrote a comic series continuing on after the initial series of movies, the first two movies. Keep that in mind, because here's the other thing. There were lots of comics, lots of Hellraiser comics. The original Hellraiser comic series ran from 1989 to 1992 and had a run of 20 issues. Altogether, there were 20 comic series across three publishers, and some of them were compendiums to the original series, while some of them continued on the mythos. There were a couple of crossover issues, and the third movie had its own comic adaptation. Barker has also written an anthology of stories from the world of Hellraiser, as well as a sequel to his original novella that's called The Scarlet Gospels, which is also a crossover with another one of Barker's series. There's a prequel to The Scarlet Gospels that takes place after Hellbound Heart, but it's not a sequel. It was also written by Barker that was based on a partial short story he'd written called Heaven's Reply. The story became part of the script for a Hellraiser reboot that never came to be. Oh, and there's also a Sherlock Holmes in the World of Hellraiser crossover novel as well. Hi everyone. I guess this is the place where I ask you to like and subscribe if you're liking the video, and I really would appreciate it if you did that. but I'd also appreciate it if you'd consider following me on Twitch as well. I stream there every day, but this weekend, November 5th and 6th, 2022, I will be doing two 12-hour marathons back to back from noon till midnight my time for Extra Life 2022 this year. This is my 12th year doing it, and it's an important one for me. When I was younger, I was in an accident. I broke my leg in two places. I shattered my heel. I was in traction for 6 weeks with my leg up in the air, and then I was in a half body cast for 8 weeks after that. I was in a hospital out of province, and I wish I could have been at the IWK, which is the hospital that I'm playing for here in Nova Scotia. They take care of kids all over the province, and IWK has just been a thing ever since I can remember, honestly. As noted, I'm from Nova Scotia, and at the end of September, Hurricane Fiona went through the province. Now, while I happen to be lucky enough to get minimal damage, a few broken trees here and there were quite a few people in the province who were without power 3 weeks after the hurricane had gone through. So you can kind of see why I hope that I really want to do this Extra Life to help support IWK today. And if you can't help financially today, they do accept donations until December 31st every year, and then they start right back up on January 1st. And if you can't donate financially, if you come hang out, spend some time with me, keep me company. It's been a while since I've done a marathon, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, thanks. Back to the, horror. Speaking of crossovers, there were a couple of movie scripts that would have put Michael Myers against Pinhead. Picture this. It's 2002. A young Michael Myers opens the lament configuration, but he's possessed by Sam Hain, so he can break out of hell fairly easily. The Cenobites chase after him. The first time the project was turned down, it was because Dimension Films thought that the upcoming Freddy vs. Jason was going to suck. It's up for debate if it sucked or not, but it still made $114 million from a $30 million budget. Clive Barker was going to write the script, with John Carpenter being considered to direct. Eventually, Halloween's producer decided not to do it due to fan backlash. But hey, at least we got Halloween Resurrection and Hellraiser Hellseeker, right? That's not the only thing. That's not the only bit of lost media tied to Hellraiser. Clive Barker had asked British experimental group Coil to write the film's score. He called it bowel churning. The group created 9 tracks, but ultimately the producers wanted something more traditional. The band eventually released the tracks on A Natural History 2 in 1995. There were also a few attempts over the years to make a Hellraiser game in one form or another, but by Dead by Daylight will be the first time Pinhead was successfully made it into a game. And finally, there is one last bit of lost media. The film itself. The original draft of the movie came back with an X rating. There are 2.5 shots removed from the first hammer murder, with one of the shots being the hammer embedded into the skull of the victim. In another murder, the actor felt it made more sense for him to be naked when he was being killed, so they filmed it that way, but the MPAA was terrified of exposed male penis. When Kirsty fights back against Frank and grabs his guts, the original was more graphic, showing a close-up of Frank's bloody guts. And when Frank is being torn apart by the Cenobites' hooks, that scene was more graphic as well, with his head exploding and his brain splattering all over the place. They didn't just cut the gore, though, they cut the sex as well. In an interview with Samhain magazine in July of 1987, Barker said his original version was much more explicit and less violent, but the MPAA was all sodomy is bad, let's make Frank more rapey. And if you think that joke is in poor taste, the original story has Frank describing it as rape, except for her verbal consent. That wasn't the only time a sex scene got cut out. The second was a scene where Frank was spanking Julia. Apparently, 2 consecutive butt slaps is fine, but 3 is obscene. Given how repressed sexually the 80s were, I'm surprised Barker could just slip those S&M costumes on the Cenobites in the first place. It wasn't really mainstream back then, though, so we'll probably have Hellraiser to thank for leather-wearing big-titty goth girls now.
The Lament configuration, also known as the Box of Sorrows, was the first and most well-known of the puzzle boxes created by Philippe Lemarchand, who in the novel created mechanical singing birds but was only mentioned. Lemarchand first appeared in the comics that were created by Clive Barker, and he was a mass murderer who used human fat and bones to create his boxes. And he was older than he was eventually shown to be in the 4th film. In the movie, he's a toy maker, and the Lament configuration was commissioned by an aristocrat named Duc de la Halle, who was obsessed with dark magic in 1784. The aristocrat and his servant kill a woman and remove her from her skin. And they do this so they can put the summoned demon princess inside of her skin and control her with the Lament configuration. And they can do this so long as they don't get in Hell's way. The servant and the demon turned on the aristocrat, and Lemarchand comes up with a design called the Elysium configuration, which can destroy demons. The servant commands the demon to kill Lemarchand after telling him that his bloodline is cursed for having made the box in the first place. The box is different in the book and the movie as well. In the movie, the box moves and twists in different shapes, but in the book it has to be taken apart and put back together in a new shape. The film version is also more flashy than the book version, which makes sense because it's a visual medium. The gold trimming and the arcane inscriptions were added to the look in the film, with the box being smooth and slight etching along the edges.
When you think of Hellraiser, the first thing that comes to mind is Pinhead. And when you think of Pinhead, you think of Doug Bradley. Or you don't know about the series at all, and I'm not sure why you're here. No, you still think about Doug Bradley. Let's be real here. But in Hellbound Heart, the Cenobite wasn't actually named and was androgynous and had jeweled pins. In fact, the name Pinhead came about on set, and Clive Barker never really liked it. Pinhead is credited as lead Cenobite in the film and not as Pinhead. He was never originally meant to be the lead Cenobite either, though. Originally, the speaking parts were meant to be spread among all of the Cenobites fairly evenly, but when they found that the makeup for Butterball and Chatterer made it difficult to understand the actors, the script was rewritten to give Pinhead most of the lines. The character in the film was once a British soldier named Elliot Spencer, who became jaded after seeing the horrors of war. It is implied in the first series of comics that he isn't the first Hell Priest, and it may be a title that is passed on as one Cenobite leaves or dies. But in the Scarlet Gospels, it's up for debate if the Hell Priest is one entity or a title assumed by new Cenobites. The first version of Pinhead appeared in a play in 1973 called Hunters in the Snow, which was written by Barker and starred Bradley in the role of the Dutchman, who was an undead inquisitor.
have such sights to show you. What a waste of good suffering. Now you must come with me. You summoned me. I came. I must be going now. Oh, please, no tears. They are a waste of good suffering. You shall not escape me. Oh no, don't do that. The box. You opened it. I came. I'll tear your soul apart.
And that's it. All you really need to know about Hellraiser and Dead by Daylight. I tried to stay away from the more controversial stuff that happened around the time that this character came out and just wanted to focus on how the Hellraiser world fit into the world of Dead by Daylight. So, uh, let me know down below if you want a separate video about all of that. I'm more than willing to do that. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked it. If you do, please leave a subscribe, like all that stuff. I want to send a big, 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 huge thanks out to Wang for doing this and just putting up with me in general. If you want to hear more about the Hellraiser game that never happened, he's got a video on his channel all about that, and I will put the link up somewhere around here. And yeah, let me know in the comments below how you pronounce the name of the shiny magical box in the Hellraiser series. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!